Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm going to open up my little chat box so I can talk to you guys. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Glenn Mackintosh. I am a psychologist who is extremely passionate about eating, physical activity, weight, and body image. They're my jam. I run a clinic called Weight Management Psychology, full of psychologists and dietitians and trainers who work in this space. And I'm also really lucky to teach Australia's psychologists and dietitians and fitness trainers through the APS, Dietitians Australia and Fitness Australia. Dr. Peta Stapleton and I are very happy to have you today. I will introduce Peta, although I think in this circle she probably needs no introduction for most of us, a few heads nodding. Peta is also a psychologist by trade, but her main role now is a professor at Bond University, where she would say one of the world's leading EFT researchers. I would say, if you look at the amount of published studies, the leading researcher in emotional freedom techniques. And specifically today, we're going to talk about some of Peta's research in eating, physical activity, weight, and mood. Peta is also one of the Southern Hemisphere's few EFT master trainers. So Peta and I are very happy to have you all here. And we do know a big welcome as well to people who are watching in their own time. We did get a lot of people, almost 600 people sign up for this webinar, but a lot of them were all over the world and said they're going to be watching in their own time. So welcome to you too, guys. Just some little flag posts about where we're going to go today. Peta is going to start off by talking to you about some of the research specifically in eating, food cravings, weight management, including a focus on the trial of our online tapping for weight management program. I'm personally really proud of this research. A lot of us do online tapping. There are a lot of online tapping programs, but this was, to our knowledge, the first published paper to ever research online tapping. And it was also has been, we've done a 2-year follow-up study, which Peta will talk you through. And I'm really proud of that too, because it's the longest follow-up study of any tapping for weight concerns intervention. And as we all know, the name of the game when it comes to weight management is long-term change. So I will be sitting here with my notes because every time I talk to Peta, I learn from her, and I'm sure it will all be the same. Then I will come back and I'm going to talk you through some of the insights that we had creating our tapping for weight management program for the public, because it was a really cool process. We kind of, Peta and I put our heads together, and as you know, psychologists, we have a combined 50 years experience working in this space. So we put together a program that we really liked. But then through the process of that worldwide clinical trial, we were able to ask the participants what we had missed and what else they wanted to work on, which really kind of rounded out the program beautifully. So I want to share some of those insights with you, so you can then go and apply them with your clients in your tapping sessions. I will then let you know about the EFT tapping for weight management practice certificate that Peta and I have been developing, basically due to practitioners' demand. People were using the program for the public for their own learning, which was fantastic. but we wanted to create something that was specifically designed to give tapping practitioners and other health professionals the skills and the knowledge that they needed to really apply tapping very effectively in the areas of eating, physical activity, body image, and weight concerns. So really looking forward to having you. And as I'm sure that most of you know, Peter and I can talk about this stuff all day. So please, we will have time for questions. So please put your questions in the chat box. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Peter, who's going to talk to you about the research, and then I will be back in a minute.
Thank you, Glenn, and hello, everybody. It'd be great if you could even tell us where you are. I noticed Tasmania coming up in the chat function there. So yeah, let us know where you are. And like Glenn said, yeah, I could probably talk about research and make it interesting for like years. So it's the greatest compliment when people say to me, oh, wow, I thought research was boring, until they heard me talk about it. So I'm going to share my screen and just tell you what we have done in the EFT world. So let me do fancy things. All right, we're all good. So I'm going to talk you through the research that we have been doing. So this is where I started in the EFT space, which was at the previous university where I worked. Now I'm at Vaughan University. So yeah, we did probably now, if I count back, about 15 years worth of research in this food space, because clinically my area was eating disorders. So it was what I knew best. And when EFT came into my private practice world, it seemed to be a logical thing to take into the research. And it was really at the beginning, a couple of decades ago, of when EFT research was actually occurring around the world. So this is a quick research summary, just to kind of give you a lay of the land there. So let's have a look. So just in case anybody, I know lots of you may well be very familiar with EFT. Obviously, the way we talk about it, so if you're kind of trying to find ways to, tell someone about what this thing is, we talk about it in the research being a psychophysiological stress reduction technique. Psychological, but physiological. So that's the phrase Dr. Dawson Church and I tend to use in our latest publications. Obviously, it's a way to reduce stress. It's a stress reduction technique. We use, obviously, the tapping technique, you can see on the image there, and tap on known acupuncture points. So obviously, that research has changed in the last 5 to 8 years as well, where the primovascular system has been identified in the body as a physical vascular acupuncture system. So clinical EFT that we test are those 8 points, and it's a blend of cognitive behavioral therapy. We're very mindful in being present to what's happening, but exposure therapy. So both of these areas in therapy are very well known and very well established. The energy psychology field, if you like, and EFT is the most prominent energy psychology technique that's studied and published, has more than 320 publications, and most of those tend to be the gold standard clinical trials. So I think I do have, here we go. So this is where we're at the moment, just as far as the research. This particular image comes from Dr. David Feinstein's paper that came out earlier this year. So over 29 and even more now, meta-analysis and systematic reviews that feature obviously EFT. So they are the gold standard. They're the peak of the pyramid that show so many studies have been done that we can analyze all of them together. More than about 70 randomized clinical trials. So accounting for bias, people don't get to choose which kind of treatment they get. Many studies that might have just been on EFT, but no control group or no comparison, and hundreds of clinical case studies, anecdotal reports, that type of thing. And now I need to add another column, another layer there. There's more than 100 trials that have been published in non-English journals. So coming out of countries like Korea, Iran, Malaysia, China, where clinical trials are actually being run on versions of EFT, but published in non-English journals. So there's more than 100, and a paper summarized those this year. Now, 99% of these studies that are published show that at least on 1 or 2 outcomes, EFT was statistically significant or effective. So that 1%, I keep saying I'm going to go and read what that 1% was. I probably we'll just lose track of that at some point. So 99% of those studies, which that is kind of fairly uncommon in the therapy space. So more than, if I just minimize that, there's more than 600 types of therapy. So just talking about therapy in general, most of them out there don't have research behind them, yet they're used. So it doesn't mean that they don't work for the clinical field, but energy psychology is in the top 10% of those published. So we've got all these ones that get used but aren't published, but energy psychology, aka EFT, is in the top 10% there for all therapy. So lots of different areas have been published on, and I've done many of those trials, so 18 years worth now. So psychological conditions, anxiety, depression, phobias, PTSD. Physical ones, so we've just finished a 2-year chronic pain trial, pain, insomnia, autoimmune. We've actually just finished in the last couple of weeks the first pilot of OCD, and we will start that again late January next year. Lots in that sports performance space, and then lots of studies coming out, and I'll show you obviously one of the functional MRI studies today on biological outcomes with EFT. So what have we done? We have done a lot in this space. So we started back in about 2007. We ran our original trial at Griffith University, which was just a 4-week trial of EFT for food cravings with the intention to help people lose weight. So that was 2 hours a week, 8 hours. And that particular trial, my boss at the time said, I'm pretty sure no one will come to this trial just because it's a bit weird, as you know, tapping on your face. So I went on just a local current affairs show. They aired that across Australia and also New Zealand, and we had 4,500 people apply for that trial. So yeah, people were interested, and that told us that maybe in this weight space people were open. So that was the first one. Obviously, that was all statistically significant, and I'll show you some graphs in a minute. All of that's published, all of these trials are. What we were getting as feedback then, because we were the first to start publishing about obviously tapping on your face helps you reduce a food craving and ultimately you can lose weight. We did 12-month follow-up on that 4-week trial. The journals started to go, but how does this compare to gold standard therapy? So that was the next logical step for us, where we compared, again, these were in-person trials. We compared an 8-week trial, 2 hours a week, of EFT versus cognitive behavioral therapy. And they were run here at Bond University. So over a couple of year period, again, we did 12-month follow-up. And I'm going to show you some of those comparisons coming up in some graphs, and showed that EFTs sustained its outcomes at 12 months, whereas some of the CBT participants didn't. So again, it's about when those outcomes occur and how long it's sustained for. So we did that one. Let me click the next one. We started to then get demand in the local schools just based on media. Schools are like, can you come and help our students give up junk food and soft drinks and things like that? What we did in some of those school trials were, and we had Department of Education approval, so they were run in school time with parental consent. This particular trial, and again, it's published, we focused on healthy food choices more so than reducing perhaps unhealthy food choices, just in that body image kind of eating space. And I've got lovely emails that I've saved where we had mums emailing us saying, I don't know what you're doing in that trial, but my, son in grade 9 just came home and asked if we could have cauliflower for dinner and had never eaten vegetables in his life. So that was a lovely trial that was part of some of my students' research that helped them. Then we were like, oh, what do we do next? And Glenn and I had connected and we're like, let's take this into the online space. I wonder if it'll work if we, really kind of have a focused intention here of videos that replicate what we'd done in person that we know worked, but we deliver it as a self-paced version. So could people get the same outcomes in an online kind of arena, supported with access to us as the team, but could they get the same outcomes? So that was the first online 8-week self-paced delivery. We had a look at our treatment length, so that 4-week versus 8 weeks, and we wanted to know, what do we need? We actually did find, and again, these publications all exist, that the 8-week version was slightly more effective for older participants that were 60 years and older. So they got the same outcomes if they were younger, but the older people in our trials actually got some of those outcomes in that week 6, 7, and 8. So that was about the only difference. Otherwise, 4 weeks was enough for them. We also ventured into the bariatric patient space with some local services, and that was a US versus Australian trial where we supported patients that had had bariatric surgery, where they had access to our online program. And we found that the group, they had some controlled eating, they had usual care, and they had our EFT program. And those that had the EFT program actually did better with their emotional eating. And this was obviously statistically significant than just doing controlled eating after surgery. The brain scan study came along. That was the first in the EFT world. I'll show you those. And then we had a look at our online program versus our in-person program, so that 8-week one, because we wanted to know how did they compare. So we were looking at existing data there rather than a new trial, and showed that those delivery versions were exactly the same. We got the same outcomes, whether they attended in person or did the online. And it was that online program that Glenn just said we did a 2-year follow-up. So I'm going to show you the 2-year follow-up on that. So there's the 2-year. So at that point, we kind of rested and went, I think we've done everything in this space, really. And then, of course, we all faced a worldwide global pandemic. So you can see sort of our progression through over those years and decades, and just exactly what we've done. So part of the research journey for us in the EFT world has been, and some of it's been in response to journals asking us, so what happens with this technique in the body, not just psychologically, but physically? So we have done, and here in Australia, we've done cortisol trials. The US trials have looked at immune system markers that can be done through blood testing, obviously the psychological outcomes, blood pressure we sometimes measure, but you can see food cravings in this particular paper across a couple of number of this particular study examined a range of different studies, so looking at all of those biomarkers, and you can see the decrease there in food cravings is really quite profound, and it's in line often with the anxiety reduction. So as cravings go down, so does anxiety. We've done another paper where we looked at as food cravings and anxiety reduced, so did depression. So there's a range of different things coming out there at a biological level. So I love a good graph, so I'm going to show you this one. This was the original 8-week online intervention. If I just talk you through it, this is just looking at food cravings, anxiety, and depression. So just the relationship there. And these are the EFT group. So you can see from week 1 to week 8, just the decline. And there was no kind of peaks or troughs or plateaus in between. It just significantly kept reducing. What happens in these trials, people bring their food in. So it is exposure therapy. And we do encourage that in our online programs that we have available now as well. You sit in front of the video with your food and you actually pay attention to what's happening there. So you can see the measurement there of that, and what happened at the 2-year follow-up was that just stays significantly low. We didn't get any peaks back there in that. So it's nice to sort of see it visually. The 8-week program that was followed up 2 years later. So these are the percentages of what happened at the 2-year follow-up. So not only were their food cravings reducing in that 8 weeks, like you saw, but all of these things that we were measuring, like how much power does food have over you when it's sitting there on the, counter, depression, anxiety, somatic symptoms, and ability to restrain yourself, you might call that willpower. Those percentages remained at the 2-year follow-up. So they did not come back up at all and then drop again. They just stayed down low and continued for 2 years. What that looked like when we followed up with our participants was they couldn't remember the food that they'd actually done their tapping on in the trial, to the point where we had to remind some of them, and they would just laugh and go, I can't remember the last time I ate that food, and we'd go in our trial 2 years ago, that kind of thing. So, so that was lovely kind of feedback. We'd always had 12-month follow-up, 6-month, 12-month follow-up, that same kind of thing. It was almost like amnesia 2 years later. But what it coincided with was also weight loss. So obviously body mass index and weight loss, which is what they wanted. They wanted to be able to lose weight by just not having that food prominent and not needing any willpower to stay away from it. Some of them used to say to us, I just don't go down that aisle in the supermarket anymore. I just don't think to go down that aisle. So this particular study shows the comparison to cognitive behavioural therapy. So again, it's a little bit messy, but black is CBT, EFTs are blue again, and again, just looking at those three symptoms. So you can see for the EFT group, again, over 8 weeks, we just get that kind of reduction. So these guys were randomly allocated into one of two groups, and they were in person here at the university. So they used to turn up every week. And you can see the blue is the EFT group that over 12 months follow-up, everything just remains plateaued. So they just don't remember later on, they lose weight, and none of that spikes back up. Now you can see for the cognitive behavioural group, that program itself didn't impact depression at all. So it had no impact in the 8 weeks, and it didn't actually impact at 6 or 12 months. So they had no outcome, whereas the EFT group, by tapping on food cravings and reducing some of the trans fats in their diet and what we know about gut microbiome, had an impact on any depression symptoms. What happened with their other symptomology, because we were targeting food cravings and anxiety, was black line. You can see, yes, it reduces over the 8 weeks, but you can see the anxiety at 6 months and 12 months comes almost back to baseline. So their anxiety returned. And most of that occurs in CBT because it requires you to do homework. It requires you to keep practicing, whether that's, addressing your thoughts or being aware of the feeling and then doing something to shift your focus. And if you fall out of that habit and you haven't changed it enough, then it just comes back, and that's what we saw. So those papers are actually published in 2 publications where, the comparison there, whereas the EFT group don't have to keep practicing because you do it in session, you actually don't have to keep practicing. And that's quite funny. Anecdotally, we say to them, at the end of their 8-week program, when we're doing their follow-up, including 2 years, have you remembered to do any tapping since? So we asked them, have you tapped, and what did you tap on? And by and large, 95% say, no, I haven't tapped since the 8-week program ended. They're like, I just haven't thought about it. I haven't had any issues with food. The 5% that go on to love it and tap, they'll tap on other things like, oh yeah, I felt angry that day and I did some tapping, or I felt a bit stressed and I did some tapping. What that tells us is you don't need to keep tapping, that those are sustainable if you're tapping in session, which is exciting for us. And we were learning this as we went. So we pivoted because of everyone's going, what happens in the brain? And we're like, okay. So we managed to get some funding. We had a very local, as in 2 minutes walk, hospital from the university. So what we did was we put our participants inside a functional MRI machine and we showed them on a headset high calorie food images for about 11 minutes. They sort of cycled through. There were 6 images and they had to focus in on thinking about eating and drinking these images. So we picked foods that they'd targeted in all our trials over the years. So, there were cookies and ice cream and fries and soft drinks and beer and hamburgers. And it was all very lovely. And it was 8 o'clock in the morning. So none of them had eaten any food. They had to come in prior to eating breakfast. So they were hungry and we wanted to see what happens in the brain. So you can see these images here showing the red and yellow, a male and a female from our group, just showing the areas that are highlighting there. Those areas are to do with focus and attention, because we said think about eating and drinking, and also reward and loss. They're those areas of the brain. So that's the part that's firing, because straight after this scan, they went off and did a 4-week 2 hours a week tapping program in person at the university on their own personal foods. So we brought them back in the 5th week when they'd finished, and we scanned them again and showed them the same images. And you can see there's a statistically significant lack there of any firing. So they're just looking at those images and feeling quite neutral, if you like. They're just looking at them going, oh yeah, they're a bit boring, you know. And we can see those reward and loss areas aren't firing in the brain. We actually did a few scans where we had people that had eaten and were completely full, so they weren't hungry at all, and the same areas fire in the brain if you look at images that you desire. We had a control group. I haven't got that scan for you. The control group didn't change at all, so they didn't get the 4 weeks of tapping. They just got 4 weeks rest and they came back and they had no change whatsoever. So that's published in an open access journal as well. So that's us. That's what we've been doing. We have pivoted a little bit and doing some other kind of EFT research at the moment, but I am going to hand back to Glenn so that he can take back over. And any questions that you feel you want to pop in there, I can answer at the end.
Beautiful. You just caught me, Peter. I was, as always, furiously writing some notes. And I did have a little smile to myself when you were talking about the original trials you conducted 2008 to 2010, because I have told this story before. I tell it with a little bit of embarrassment. I was absolutely one of those health professionals who thought that tapping was a bit weird. And it was Peter's research and other research has been done that has absolutely convinced me. So it was really good to hear about the new research that's coming out and all of those studies in the non-English speaking languages. But I think for me, it was the fact that people didn't have to do homework. You know, CBT I was trained in CBT. It's a great therapy, but the flip side to it is it does require homework. And then, you know, with mental health, but especially my jam of weight concerns, really the long-term change is the name of the game. So to see changes that are either sustained or even increased over time is the most fascinating thing to me about the research. We do have one question there from Naomi, but Peter will answer that one. She'll have a quick answer to that one, I am sure. So what I'm going to do is I might share my screen now, and I want to actually take you through the modules, the exact modules in our trial, in our program for the public, and see if we can gain some insights into maybe not only what to tap on with your clients, but also some of the little insights and nuances and learnings that we gain throughout the clinical trials that Peter's been speaking about. So if I share my screen, and I'm a total nuffy at this, so I'm going to need to make sure we've done this right. Let's go here. Okay. So can you guys see like my orange little screen? Yep. No? Yes, we've got a couple. Yeah, okay, cool. Beautiful. Okay, so let me talk you through. I'm going to start by talking through, if you, this is basically the package that is the Tapping for Weight Management Practice Certificate. And it's got a few different parts, and I want to kind of talk you through all of them. Let's start with the program that we designed for the public. So if we click into this, and this is, you know, as part of the practice certificate, you get access to this entire program. Okay. So if we look here, we can see these first 7 modules were the modules that Peter and I had developed when we put our heads together based on Peter's research and my experience. And that's what we wanted to do with people. And you see these following modules, modules 8 to 11, I'll talk you through all of them, were what the members of our trial asked for when we gave them this qualitative data, qualitative surveys of, hey, what have we missed here? What else do you want to tap on? Or there was also a Facebook group, a big Facebook group. There was over 600 people in that trial, of people saying, "Hey, what about this?" And it was just a really great experience to be able to research and see if the online tapping worked. But also, it gave us an even deeper understanding into what people who had weight concerns and people who lived in larger bodies were experiencing and they wanted to tap on. So in the first module, I'll talk you through the modules and we'll see if we can gain some little insights or if I can share some things that we learned throughout developing the program. We start off with an introduction to EFT. This is obviously really basic, but we did decide that we wanted to not only tap with the people virtually, but help them to understand the theory and the rationale behind tapping. So this is actually a really important module. And probably the only lesson I gained as a tapping practitioner there was to actually take that time to do some background psychoeducation of my clients to help them understand, not just to do some tapping, but to help them understand a bit about the tapping technique, a bit about the theory, a bit about the research if they're interested. And we did get in the clinical trial, there were a lot of people who were tapping practitioners. And a lot of them would say, look, just hearing the way that Peter explains it, they would learn from that as well. So the second module is really about the food cravings. So this is the most obvious tapping target for a lot of us. People want to desire certain foods less. So again, as Peter said, we have this video on tapping away a food craving, and we always encourage people to come and do the tapping with the food in session. But we also found some really interesting things. So we added a few little bonus lessons into this module based on what our clients were experiencing. And a couple of these ones that I'll just bring your attention to was this tapping away a general desire to overeat. Food cravings is a construct used in the psychology of food. It's one that many food psychologists are familiar with. But we also had a lot of people saying, look, I don't always necessarily have like this craving or high desire or impulse. It can sometimes be just a general, I just want to eat something, and it might not be for a specific food. So that was something that we found really helpful to tap on with people, is just that, if they don't have a specific desire, a specific impulse for a particular food, just tapping away that general non-specific desire to overeat that people can have. We also found that it was helpful to help people to tap away any guilt they were experiencing after overeating. So obviously change is not a completely linear process, even with tapping, and people will still have experiences of overeating. And what we find is guilt and feelings of shame about overeating are actually related to, not surprisingly, reduced mood, but also either the tendency to restrictively diet or the tendency to continue overeating. So that can be a really helpful tapping target when you're working with your clients, even if they've missed their opportunity to tap and they have overeaten the food. The tapping technique can be still really powerful then. Now, a lot of our members really like that video. Okay, in module 3, we work into tapping into more nutritious foods. And this is like Peter was saying in the trial of the school-aged kids. A general principle that I think can be really helpful when we're tapping on weight management, and like Peter said, our clients want to ultimately lose weight, is to be really, really comprehensive. Because people will, for example, they might want to reduce their stress, they might want to reduce their food cravings or their desires for a certain food. But there are certain areas that they may not find they sort of instinctively or intuitively gravitate towards, that we know are part of that big, complex, multifaceted puzzle that is weight management. So what we did in our trial is we actually encouraged people to tap on everything, even if they felt that they didn't really need to. And what we found was that a lot of them were actually surprised with the results they would get tapping on something like healthier foods that they didn't necessarily think that they would want to tap into. One of the other aims of our program, and one of the other aims, I think, when you're tapping with someone who has desires for high calorie foods or struggles with binge eating or emotional eating, is to work on that factor that we're working on, but also everything else around it. And what we do know, as Peter said, is if we encourage people to eat more nutritiously, then they tend to eat less of the other stuff by default. So tapping away the barriers to eating more nutritious foods can be a really, really good tapping target for our clients. Okay, module 4 is a big one, as Peter said. Emotional eating is really, really huge. And all I suppose I really wanted to say here is that we can't understate the importance of working on emotional eating with your clients who have food and weight concerns. There is a lot of debate in the weight management space about how we best treat weight management, whether we do like a traditional weight loss approach or a non-diet intuitive eating approach or a bariatric surgery approach, or now the weight loss medications are becoming more popular. But what we find is that emotional eating will potentially put a spanner in the works. So it acts as a barrier to success in all of these approaches. So if your client has weight concerns and they want to lose weight, this will be something you definitely want to look at with them. Module 5 is tapping on increasing the desire for physical activity. Again, this might be one that our people wouldn't think of so instinctively, but can be really, really useful. And again, we would encourage, if you're working with a client, to, because as Peter said, people don't tend to do homework, even if it's good for them. We would encourage you to really look at everything that you can focus on with your client and tap as comprehensively on everything, because chances are that person won't, unless they become one of that 5%, won't become an independent lifelong tapper. So we really want to cover as much as we can while we have the person there with us, and that's what's going to lead to that greater results, but also greater long-term results, because of course all of these factors are related to each other. One little thing that I really like to do, this is lesson 0504, that I would really encourage you to do with your clients, is actually, like Peter said, when we're tapping on a desire for food, to bring that food in, to actually do a similar thing when we're tapping for physical activity, and encourage that person to get prepared to do a physical activity session. This works great over Zoom. And then actually tap with them on all of their barriers that come up in the moment. It can be a much better way to do it than just, them trying to think of what the barriers are. I'll often say to clients in session, what are your barriers? And might come up with a few things. But then if I say to them, hey, let's go for a walk now, then there's often like a fear or an anxiety response or a level of discomfort. And then that's beautiful stuff that we can then tap on. So just a little hint there when you're tapping for physical activity is that you can do that just before the physical activity session, tap away the barrier, and then have that person go and do that physical activity session. Really good little process to do. We do a session on tapping on drinks. So I think that's, a really, again, one that can kind of go under the radar. And just another sort of encouragement to, when you're tapping with clients in this space, to be very comprehensive. So we do work on tapping on alcohol, soft drinks, tea and coffee, and then increasing the desire for water. And again, we would encourage people to tap on all of these, even if there's only a little kind of a concern, because we often find that's really quite useful. we often talk about, the weight management puzzle. Is there's so many factors there, and if we can do something that'll get a 1% change, so if we can say, for example, get someone to drink a little bit more water, then their desires for other drinks are probably going to go down a little bit. Their desire for less nutritious foods is going to go down a little bit. They're going to be more hydrated, so their mood's going to be a bit better. So we really want to encourage our people when they're with us to be working on all of the pieces of the puzzle, because what we find is if we work on some of the pieces of the puzzle but not others, those others will creep in and undo some of the good work that we've been doing, and then we don't get those lovely sustained changes that we want. This is a really cool little module, and I would really encourage you to talk with your clients about mindful eating or intuitive eating. We all know that they're good things to do, but this module really focuses on tapping and clearing some of those barriers to a mindful and intuitive way of eating. Things like fast eating, things like the judgments that you might have around food being good or bad, or weight gain or weight loss foods, any distractions like the phone or the TV. So I would really encourage you to have these discussions with your clients, and they will know that mindful eating is a great thing to do, but help them to clear away some of their barriers to being more mindful eaters. So now we start to get into some of the modules that were that I would say that probably that the first 7 modules are more symptomatic modules. They're more about the symptoms, and then of course we branch out from there. Um, but in the trial, what the members really asked us for was tapping on areas that were sitting underneath, that were deeper than their eating and weight concerns, and that were sitting around their eating and weight concerns. So I suppose the learning there is that yes, we wanted to tap on those symptoms that the person is experiencing, absolutely. But we also want to look deeper and see what else might be going on for that person that we can use tapping to help them clear away. So the first module was about tapping away weight worries, and I could talk about this for hours, but as a simple kind of way to think about it, often the more concerned we are about weight, the less effective we are at weight management. So here's some really useful tapping targets to help people actually worry less about their weight, and then it becomes a more natural process where they can just focus on taking care of themselves, nourishing their bodies, and moving them in a way that's right for them, rather than that really pressured desire to lose weight quickly, which can kind of throw a spanner in the works. So we work on here tapping away the scales, the desire to weigh regularly, tapping away that feeling of pressure to lose weight, tapping away that dieting confusion we can have, where it's like, oh my god, do I do paleo or keto or gluten free, and if we clear a lot of that away, the person just knows, you know, that a salad is more nutritious than a burger. It's pretty easy, and it's pretty intuitive if we tap away some of that confusion. And then also tapping away the allure of dieting. Say someone is losing weight, but they're not losing it quickly enough, or they hit a weight plateau. There's always that tendency to kind of go back into something that might be a bit crazy and a bit unsustainable. So tapping away that desire. We do a module on tapping on family and social issues. We do live in a culture where most people don't necessarily eat super nutritiously and take great care of their health. So if you're going to do that, then you're sort of swimming against the other school of fishes. So that raises a whole bunch of issues that we can help our people to tap through. And then module 10, tapping away resistance to change. This is a big one. This is one that we actually wanted to include in the first program, but we couldn't really fit it in the 8 weeks. We decided to do 2 weeks on emotional eating because it's so big. But this is a great thing to do if you're working with a client and they just can't seem to change, or if say they work on one area and it gets better, but another area gets worse, and you always seem to be sort of struggling to really gain any momentum. It could, of course, be because there's a desire to change, but then also some desire not to change or a desire to stay the same. So we work on this as well, tapping away. I don't want to do food prep, or I don't want to make time for myself. It's too hard, or I'm scared of the process of change, or I might even have some reasons why I don't want to lose weight. So these are all wonderful things to clear and tap through, especially with your clients who are a bit stuck. And then the final module is tapping for body image. We knew body image is obviously a very important topic. And I really loved what we created here, because we actually polled the participants and said, okay, we're going to do a module on body image. What are the things that you want to work on, that you want to tap through? So we ended up doing work on tapping away some of those labels that we give ourselves, tapping away some of those thin ideal messages from society that we then internalize. So creating a bit of a barrier towards those messages that we get every day, tapping on specific parts that you don't like my tummy or my thighs, and actually exposing ourselves to that, and then doing some tapping, and tapping away avoidance rituals. So, I won't go to that party, or I won't go on that date, or I won't apply for that job because of body image concerns. So that's a really, really beautiful module to finish off with, and it really rounds everything out very, very nicely. So I wanted to sort of share that with you, so you could see, some potential tapping targets, and maybe some new tapping targets that you might want to work on with your clients. If you want to be really, really comprehensive, which we'd really encourage you to do. That was a big learning for us. Most of us don't have our clients forever, and we don't really want our clients forever, but we want to be comprehensive in what we're tapping through, so they get the biggest and the most lasting results. And then obviously, if you are an experienced tapping practitioner, you can use that as food for thought and fodder for your tapping sessions with your clients. And if you want a hand, or you want to really delve deeply into this with Peter and I, then you can do the practice certificate, and we'll show you exactly how to do it. Okay, so we did have a lot of tapping practitioners who have done our tapping program for the public. But Peter and I did want to create something for people who wanted a certification, who wanted to really upskill themselves with the knowledge and the specific tapping in these areas. So we created the tapping for weight management practice certificate, which we're really, really excited about. And so basically, the way that it works is there's a module here that corresponds with every module in the program for the public. So you kind of have the program for the public, and that's really good, because you get to see how we do it with real life people, for real life people, I should say. And then this section is designed specifically for health practitioners. So you see, for each module, there is a lesson, and then there's a quiz, and then unlocking all those quizzes and getting all the right answers, which you will, leads you to that practice certificate. And you see there is one there for every module. So if we just go into, say, the tapping on less nutritious foods, what we do in these modules is we give you specific points for your first, a scope of practice. So depending on what type of practitioner you are, a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist, a dietitian, a nutritionist, a personal trainer, an ex-phys, whatever it is, we give you a suggested scope of practice to help you make sure you're practicing within your scope of practice. Then we give you specific points on the application. So things that we really wanted people to know who are doing tapping with clients in this area in session. Then we get into the troubleshooting, what we often call that next step. It's like, yes, setting up the tapping session, starting to get into the tapping session, but what are the common problems that people have, and how do we transcend those problems with the person? And then any other points for professionals. So this might be stuff from research, it might be stuff from our clinical trials, it might be theory from the psychology of eating or physical activity or body image that we think would help you to know to tap more effectively in this space with your clients. So as a little example, I'll see if I can show you this video. This is one of the points for professionals when we're talking about a
So
food
Peter,
craving.
another interesting thing that happens is once the person's really reduced that desire for the food, we have this kind of question of, well, what do we do with the food now? What happens now? I don't really want the food, but some people will eat it just because it's still there, or they don't know whether to take it home, or they don't want to throw it out because they feel like that's wasteful. So what do you do there?
Yeah, and we certainly looked at this in research trials because we found that about half the people coming through our trials were quite happy to actually discard the food, never buy it, never look at it ever again. So, yep, they could easily do that. But then for the other half, definitely, we had that notion that you've just mentioned of wastage, that perhaps through long-held sort of childhood and family patterns and beliefs, that there was definitely something negative attached to discarding or throwing food out.
Yep.
And what we found that even tapping had reduced that craving to zero, they still had a negative feeling in throwing it out. So we actually recommend, and you will have videos on this, that people do the tapping technique on those feelings before they discard it.
Yep.
So if they definitely have no desire left anymore to eat it, but maybe have a feeling of guilt in actually discarding that or throwing it in the rubbish, that they do tapping on that before they actually go through that action.
Yep.
It's definitely a way, just a nice way to complete the process. And then of course we do recommend, if people remember, that in a week's time perhaps go buy that food again.
Yep.
Test whether or not there's any craving left or any other feeling. So we have that jigsaw analogy that we talk about. There's different aspects often to a behaviour, even a craving. So if they remember in a week's time to go and buy the food, just to test, how does it feel now? We absolutely recommend that. Of course, if you forget and it never enters your mind ever again, you've definitely had a win with the tapping for the craving.
Yeah, absolutely.
That gives you a little bit of the feeling for what we're doing in the practice certificate. And they're great little videos that just help you really with all of the little things. Basically, it's everything that we would want you to know when you're tapping on this area with your clients. The final thing I'll let you know about is we're really excited about the practice certificate. This is the launch of the practice certificate, so we're really, really excited, and we wanted to include some little bonus that we could give to people, and what we decided on was this Tapping Away Weight Worries webinar series that Peter and I did for the members of my online program. I have an online program called the Transformation Support Community, where we help people through eating, physical activity, weight, and body image concerns. And Peter and I did a wonderful little 8-webinar masterclass on tapping for weight concerns. So you can see here it covers a lot of the areas that we cover in the program, obviously. But I think the beauty about this series is that there were a lot of people who were already quite experienced with tapping. Either they were tapping practitioners or they were members of the public who had already done some tapping work. So we expected to go a little bit deeper in these sessions, and what ended up happening is that we went really deep really quick. So they're really a deep dive into some of the areas sitting underneath these common concerns people have. Peter did also take volunteers and do one-on-one tapping with them via the Zoom session. It's all recorded. So there's a really good opportunity to really go deep into those topics if you'd like to, and also to really see how it's done with real life people. So that's a really cool little resource. And we wanted to give that to everyone who signs up from the webinar. So this is basically a bonus for people who sign up before November 6th. You get that bonus Tapping Away Weight Worries. And you get, guys, everything as part of the practice certificate. You get lifetime access to all of it. So I think that's almost it from me. I've been talking for a long time. Emma will, who runs the program, will link you to the page for like the sales page if you'd like to sign up, which is the page here. But you'll see you can find out any extra little information if you want any more information. And we do have payment plan options, so you can do like a one-off payment, or there are some payment plan options which people really like. If you sign up before November 6th, then you get those bonus webinars from the Tapping Away Weight Worries series. So I have been talking well and truly enough now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to, Peter and I can dovetail about any questions. Have you got any questions there, Peter, that that we are looking to answer, or have we been answering them?
I have been trying to answer so people can see as we go. Let me just see. So Masuko asked the graphs. They're in a document that I'm going to send to Glenn so that when the recording goes out, that document can be included. So we just summarized all of our research and outcomes and all those graphs in that document, and that is publicly available. So I'll just make sure I send that through so everyone can have a copy of those graphs. And obviously the brain scans are on my website. So you can absolutely have a look at those, link to them. They're in open access journals, so that's not a problem as well. Just scrolling through to have a quick look. I wonder how it would go with the public not so experienced or new to tapping, Masuko asked. I think the practice certificate by its very nature tends to be for professionals that want to learn more about how to use this with clients. So that's what Glenn's been sharing and talking about is obviously you would support clients that were new to tapping with that program. So that would be my comment. Sue asked, is the course considered OPD? I'm wondering if that's supposed to be CPD, professional development. Sue, is that right? Otherwise, what's the O stand for? Oh, CPD, there you go. Yes, so CPD for allied health professionals here in Australia is self-driven, and you obviously audit yourself so that if for whatever reason you needed to provide evidence of what you'd done. So the fact that the APS, the Australian Psychological Society, featured me last year for 2 webinars on EFT. They're open and interested to obviously promoting the research. So yes, we would consider something. Someone did ask a question back in the scroll about the quizzes. And part of having quizzes in there means that you can actually genuinely use it for that you've been tested. So that is why we include quizzes. So it does qualify for professional development, that kind of thing. What else are you noticing there, Glenn?
There was a question who is from a new student of EFT. It says, how do you know there isn't a medical condition underlying a client's weight problem that they're frustrated with? We've been told that it's the first thing to address before embarking on EFT. And I would think that many wouldn't know if there was a medical condition underlying a weight problem. I think absolutely. I think that I'm a huge advocate, and so is Peter, of interdisciplinary care. And we think probably for weight concerns, the interdisciplinary dream team is the doctor, which might then branch out to the specialist doctor, the dietitian or nutritionist, the movement specialist, and the psychologist.
Yeah.
We do often find, in our trial, we will say, we would have had in our clinical trial hundreds of people who had some underlying medical conditions, and they still got benefits from the program. But absolutely, if there's something physiological going on, then you absolutely want to address that as well. We had a specialist doctor come and talk to our team about who specialized in weight loss medications, and she said, look, really the weight loss medications target that homeostatic mechanism in the brain, which is your hunger, your fullness, your appetite. But the part that it doesn't target is that mesolimbic system, which is the pleasure, the reward, and is saying that's what we need the psychology for. So absolutely, while I'm encouraging you to be very comprehensive in your tapping with the client, I would absolutely encourage you to then broaden out to consider all of the aspects that are going to be contributing to that problem, because it is a really large, complex, kind of multifactorial kind of a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. We always like to write things like, in the absence of any diagnosed medical condition, that kind of thing. So yes, it's absolutely. And I know someone's talked about hormones and thyroid, and like Glenn said, if that's being managed by someone medically, certainly we've both, and many practitioners around the world still continue to use tapping to support that person with other issues, and that could be about emotional eating or body image or exercise, whilst the other aspect medically is being cared for. So yeah.
I'm just seeing there's a question here by Mitsuko, who says, how helpful do you think it was the tapping on the resistance? I think it was super duper helpful. And the way I would describe it was that it's like, almost like, I think of resistance like a handbrake that holds the person back. And then once you do that tapping on the resistance, you're lowering that handbrake, and all of the other stuff that you are doing starts to just seem a bit easier. Those problems that the person had seem to be less challenging. Not that they're not there, but they're a lot less challenging. And the other part of the question was, would it have been more effective for if we had have added it earlier? It's always a really interesting question. We added it later because not everybody identified as having resistance, and of course not everyone will have the resistance, and even some people will believe they have resistance, but it's actually tied up to with like just this really strong addiction to a particular food, and once they get over that, they're like, oh, actually there was no other resistance. But I did have a laugh too, Mitsuko, when you said there was like that big thing about, encourage your clients to join the program and earn, is really eye-catching. Just on that, we would often recommend that there is, if you want to take your clients through this program, we would love you to take them through it. It is better if you've done the program through the practice certificate yourself, obviously. But then it is something that you can do with clients and encourage them to work through the modules as like a guided self-help. And we find that works really, really well because then the person can get some of the benefits of the program, and then they can really come in for the troubleshooting bits with you and just support along the way. And we do have, for people who are interested, and we'll put the link up to this, we do have an affiliate program that links with this. So we love the program. We want to share it far and wide. So if people are going to help us get it out there to the world, we want to, support you as well. And then practically what ends up happening is that you could go through the program from start to finish and be really, really comprehensive, or you could say in your, your clinical therapy with the person, identify, oh, we've got this big resistance to change going on here. Let's start off on that module first, and then we can pick and choose and just use your clinical judgment.
Cool. Few people are messaging just directly, sort of asking about IICT and approval, so the International Institute of Complementary Therapies. So clinical EFT is approved by IICT. So if you do go and have a look in the E section there, I went through that approval process years ago to have EFT included as an approved modality with that. So that organisation does offer discounted insurance that will cover EFT if you're a member of that organisation. So it is an approved modality. People were just asking if it was listed there, so it actually is.
Guys, I'm just looking and seeing if there's
if we've missed any.
We've missed any.
Can we recommend a resource for body image only? Client that doesn't have issues with weight but has body image distortions. And I guess I would want to tease out, is there body dysmorphia going on if there were no weight issues? Like clinically, is there something going on there at that level? And there's probably no reason that EFT, and even if it was that module only on body image, or how we're actually, like, we talk about the concept of a tabletop and table legs in EFT and in therapy in general, that body image might be a tabletop, but there's certainly going to be times in life where something happened to kind of contribute or, emphasize to that person something about negative body image. And that's what we are targeting with EFT. So absolutely learning EFT or even looking at that module will give you some guidance as to where you should take EFT in that space, because it's not just tapping on, I have a negative body image. It's actually about finding what happened in my life growing up or whenever last week, so that I can actually tap on that. So that table kind of collapses. So we use those analogies, and the jigsaw, you heard me say in the video, are all the different aspects that make up what we would call a body image issue. So yeah, I would still come back to EFT with something like that.
And I just saw there was a question here from Kathleen, just said, just to clarify, you're offering your course as an example and teaching for us to copy it, to create our own. Look, really what we find is we get a whole bunch of people, like we get people who really don't know a whole lot about tapping at all. Say, for example, a dietitian who really is at the very start of their tapping journey, through to really experienced tapping professionals who we want to upskill in these areas of eating, physical activity, weight, body image. So really it's designed to help you work more effectively with your clients in these areas and develop a real practice specialty, and then you can do what you want with it. You've got the course for the public to use, you've got the extra modules for the health practitioners, and some real deeper dives through the webinars, and then you can really do what you want with that information. Our thought would be more that you would be just using it to inform your clinical tapping sessions with clients. You could absolutely create a course if you want, but knowing how long it took Peter and Emma and Dan and I would tread carefully with that, or make sure you have a whole lot of time available.
Yeah, so true. I would like to, Nanette just asked a question, which I think is a really good one. We're talking about weight management, people that are obviously trying to lose weight, overeat, emotional eating, but what about people that have got issues with under eating? So I just want to flag, because I have just run a 2-day in-person workshop where I was training practitioners around eating disorders. So in that kind of space, and I would absolutely want to know whether or not I diagnosed it or another professional, was someone suffering anorexia nervosa? Because we're careful with the application of EFT in terms of that, just in how it would be used. If someone was under eating and it was more a food phobia, but their weight wasn't being compromised at, a medical level, then there are applications that you can actually use in that kind of space to encourage people to eat more. If it was something about texture, or it wasn't about, what they weighed on the scales and all that kind of thing. So a really good question, Nanette, just about a different clinical space there with eating disorders. Having said that, we had plenty of people in our trials with bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder that absolutely, because their weight's stable and medically, might still have their dietitian or a doctor, they were still able to use tapping to get some of those behaviours under control.
Well, guys, I think that is plenty and plenty. It sounds like we've got a few people in here who could talk all day about this stuff. But just again, on behalf of Peter and I, we really want to thank you for attending. Hope that you got some new learnings in terms of either the research or how you might apply this stuff with clients. And you have all of the details of the practice certificate. So it's something that we're really excited about. We're really proud of. We would absolutely love to have you on board. And if you have any questions or anything, we're always here for you. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon. Bye.